Okay, we've been out cutting and our saw's a little dull and it's time to sharpen it. So what's step one? Well, step one is we need to tighten this up just ever so slightly. We've got a bit of a droop here in the bottom and we need to make that a little tighter so that while we are sharpening, we don't have that kind of action happening because that's just frustrating. So let's tighten that up first. We're going to loosen the two bar nuts and we're going to put our screwdriver in that adjuster and tighten it up just a little bit. It needs to be snug, but not too tight. We should be able to just lift that out so that the tooth is captured more like this one than this one. Okay, I've tightened the bar, or the chain rather, and now you can see that it's got some play, but I can't quite lift the tooth out of the bar. That's pretty ideal, because it's going to get looser as we use it. Side pro tip, when you've tensioned and you are tightening these two nuts, it's a good idea to have one hand on the wrench on the first nut and the other hand lifting the bar in the body of the saw as you tighten. That way it doesn't have any chance to move around because you apply leverage from the two handles down onto the bar and that makes the bar go up. So if you tighten while lifting the bar, it doesn't have a chance to move later. All right, let's start filing. Okay, I have my chainsaw clamped in the vise and you'll notice that I have it clamped in the center of the bar, not towards the top, not towards the bottom. Everything moves freely as it should, and there's minimal wiggle there. So one thing I like to do to refresh my memory is look at the box that the chain came in. And I have a variety of saws, so this fits my 350, my 346, and also this 550 XP. And this is a 72 link chain that goes on an 18-inch bar, and I need to use a 3/16 file for that. And the other important information that I want to know is that I've got a 25-degree tooth angle that I want to maintain, and I should also have a little bit of a tilt on my file of 10 degrees. All right, another really handy thing to do when learning to chain sharpen is to take a brand new chain out of the box, and then we've got this brand new chain, and look at the, we're going to talk later about what it should look like, but look at the, you can see it up against my finger there, it's got quite a hook to it. That's a good thing to observe because this is what it should look like after you're done filing, with a nice hook to it. And there's the other side there that's even more visible. You can see that a round 3/16 file will fit right in there. Let's see. Yep, look at that, like a glove. So that's another good idea. Look at a brand new file, chain. So if you've got one in a box, you could keep it out to look at it and study it as you are learning to sharpen. Okay, so I made a little file guide on my miter saw, and that's 25 degrees. We hold that up to the saw, and we can look at the tooth. Some chains have a nice little hash mark in the top of them, which is very handy, so you don't really need this guide, but this is what 25 degrees looks like. And making a little block like that might be kind of handy for you as someone who sharpens. Very easy to make, You can see the picture that I took with my miter guide. So very easy to create. This picture just shows that if you don't have a miter saw, but you do have a speed square, that you can use that to create the guide. So step one in sharpening, I like to take a crayon and I like to mark a tooth. That's now my starting tooth. Put that away. I like to start beyond the edge of the vise so that my hand that is holding the other side of the file has a place to move. And okay, so got my file at 25 degrees in this direction, and now I'm going to tip at about 10 like that, and I'm going to do some gentle strokes. I'm going to let the file do the work to sharpen the tooth. And I'll get some top video too, but we just nice even gentle strokes, letting the file do the work. Tap it on the vise every once in a while to get the debris out of the file itself. Okay, now let's have a look at what it looks like from the top down. I am reaching around my tripod, so this is a little challenging, but you can see I've got my 25-degree angle, and I'm going to tip 10 degrees down ever so slightly. And we're going to just take some nice, gentle, even strokes. And that's all there is to it. And there I am, back to my first tooth. So let's make some observations here. That's tooth number 1. Then we have tooth number 2. There's tooth number 3, tooth number 4, tooth number 5, and tooth number 6. Now, tooth number 6 looks a little bit longer than 1 through 5. And that's okay because it's not drastically longer, but keeping the length of the tooth the same on all the links is kind of important because that's what makes it cut well. Otherwise, the longest tooth is the one doing all the cutting, or a lot of the cutting, and it vibrates more when you have one tooth that's longer than the other. So for nice, even, smooth cutting, you want to have all your teeth the same length. Another detail that we need to talk about is that talked about that 10-degree down angle. And that is important because when we look at the tooth in this orientation here, you can see that we've removed this gullet area right here. And that is important because that is what holds on to the chip. That's kind of like the chip pocket until the chain comes out of the wood and is able to throw the chip away. So to have a nice, round, deep gullet, not too deep, just the diameter of the file is fine, but you certainly wouldn't want to draw a straight line from this tip here down to, say, here, and have some kind of funny, I'll back up for a second here. All right, so here's a little picture I drew on my angle block that is generally the right shape of a tooth after it's been sharpened. And you want to use that 10-degree angle so that you get this area cleaned out and a nice arc made so that it has a holding place for the chip as you're cutting. Now, if you've done a poor job of sharpening, you might end up with a tooth that looks like that. And you're not putting enough file pressure in this area, and you end up with this funny tooth, and it doesn't have any place to hold on to the chip, and it just doesn't want to cut. Okay, so this is the shape that we're striving for. All right, now let's do the other side of the chain. There's my red tooth. So I'm going to roll forward. And I've added some light here, which is always handy, good to be able to see. I'm going to do some nice, gentle, even strokes. Sometimes it's a good idea to count the number of strokes and do the same number at the same pressure as a means of keeping the tooth the same length. And otherwise, or other times, you just need to keep an eye on it. It potentially looks like I'm removing a lot of tooth here, but what the video doesn't show is the degraded cutting edge from running
Another
it into
pro
the
tip
dirt a little bit.
Is to not use your file too many times. I don't generally keep a file beyond the sharpening of one chain, because saw chains are hard, and so are files, and they get dull. And they're also not very expensive. If you have to press down hard to make them cut, then that's not very safe for your hands or your knuckles. Because you saw me slip earlier, and that's a great way to cut your knuckle open. And I don't know about you, but I do not like cutting my hands. So here we are, I've got 2 teeth left. Here's my last tooth, and there's my marker, and I've done this one. Nice and easy, only takes a minute. So now let's move on to raker maintenance.
Okay, let's take a minute to talk about rakers. The rakers are between the teeth, and as you can see here, there is a little bit of space above the raker between the block of wood and the raker. So I've got the block of wood sitting on top of 2 teeth, and the raker is there, and that little distance between the top of the raker and the wood is the cutting depth of the tooth. So the more you file the raker down, the deeper the cutting depth, or the more aggressive the cut is. And the idea is to maintain an even amount of distance, or even amount of height on the raker. And we do that by utilizing the raker file guide, which for the purpose of this video looks like this guy right here. This is an Oregon product, and it sits on top of the teeth like so. So you've got a tooth there and a tooth there, and this spans them, and you run the file in that little belly, and it trims the raker down to the appropriate height. Now it's pretty easy to see on this tooth right here that there's some angle to it, so it's easy to infer that the further you file that tooth, the shorter or lower down closer to the bar it gets, and that's eating up that raker height as you file it back. So if you were to never ever file the rakers on a chain and you just kept filing the tooth, it would be sharp, but it would not cut well at all. So raker management is important, but it's important depending on your skill level as well. If you are new to chainsawing, you probably don't want an aggressive cutting chainsaw. But if you are a professional, you probably want an aggressive cutting chain because that is more efficient for what you're doing. But on the safety side, you want to be, if you're new to chainsawing, you want to be more conservative with your raker filing. Okay, here we are. We've got our raker guide on top of the teeth, and I'm going to do the right hand side because there are two little rakers there that stick up, and I've got to find my, there's my red mark, my guide again, and I'm going to start on the right hand side. So there's my red mark, and here's my right hand tooth. I'm going to start there, and that one, I think I already dressed that one, so it's kind of low already. So taking very little off because these have been dressed a little bit. There we go. Now there's one that didn't get dressed as much. So we're doing every other one. We're just doing the right hand tooth. And here again, it's nice to have a sharp file, which is, not well used or worn out. Needs to be about 3/4 of an inch wide to fit in this little slot here. And we just keep moving along. Oops, I gotta get back in I gotta pay attention to where I'm filing in the video here. So we wanna get on to that tooth. Gotta move along to the right spot. And that's all there is to it. Now this particular raker guide is a very much a homeowner's version. There are other styles, which I will show in a second, but this gives a conservative adjustment of the raker so that it doesn't make the saw too aggressive. And you just work your way along, doing one side of the chain at a time, and then you turn your saw around in the vise and you do the other. Now this material that this guide is made of is hardened, and so the file doesn't really, it makes some scratches on it, but it doesn't actually shorten it any. This guide is probably 10 years old now, at least. And I just keep plugging along here. And then voila, there we are, back to our red tooth. All right, now I'm on to my other side, so the side with the red mark on the tooth. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing here. Just doing the left-hand side of the chain now. I did a few of these teeth ahead of time, and I'm definitely doing those teeth now because they don't. There's one. There's the start one. Doesn't need much filing at all. But the object is the same as sharpening the tooth. You're going to take nice, easy, light strokes, let the file do all the work.
Rest your guide on appropriately so it's straddling each tooth, and leaves the raker right in the middle. And very easy to adjust. I'm taking very little off because I think I've probably filed them a little aggressively last time, but there are a couple that are curiously high. Need a little more filing. And then here I am back to my red mark. Now, here is another type of raker guide, and you can see that it says hard on one side and soft on the other, and that is for soft wood and hardwood. Now, I am cutting hardwood right now, so I would use the hardwood side. But if I was cutting softwood, i.e. pine, spruce, larch, or even popple, I would use the softwood side. But if you are new to chainsawing, again, take a conservative approach and use the hardwood side if this is what your file raker guide looks like. Hardwood is going to shorten the raker less and be less aggressive. And this one is very easy to use as well. You simply take this notch right here and put it behind the tooth, and the raker sticks up in the little T in the middle, and then you run your file over the top. Now, I've definitely sharpened this from the soft side, because even that just has a very little whisker I can take off. So this is going to be ready for some pretty aggressive cutting when I get out to cut some trees. There we go. Move that into the camera there. And one thing I like about this particular guide, which seems a little counterintuitive, is that you can just go, you don't have to pick a side. You can just work your way and do only one side at a time. You can do both sides at the same time. It doesn't really care. You get a little chatter on the off tooth, or the one that's closest to you. But essentially it works exactly the same. You've got a reference. You're sitting the notch here on the chain, and then the other tooth is hitting on the underside up here. You can see the marks in the guide itself where the top of the tooth is. And that's the whole idea. And again, very hard material, doesn't disappear with the file. So those are the basics of raker management. I think the only last thing that you want to do when you're sharpening your chain every time is turn your attention over here to the tip of the bar, down here. And if you've got let me back this out a little bit. If you have a tiny little hole around these 5 rivets here, that is an area where you can put grease in. This particular bar does not have that option. Okay, here's the last step in chainsaw sharpening. This little hole right here in the tip is for greasing. And I think it's a good idea to grease the tip on a daily basis, and certainly every time you sharpen it. And this is the grease gun that comes with most chainsaw kits these days, and you simply take the cone-shaped point, put it in the hole, and push down like that, and it pumps the grease into the hole. This one apparently does not have any grease in it, and I do have another style that I like, and that is this one. It's got a little button on the end, and you can press the button and out comes the grease. Put that in the hole, 1, 2, 3 pumps, and you've greased the tip. Chainsaws run at about 13,500 RPMs, so the chain speed is not quite that fast, but it's close. That's a high wear area, so you want to keep that lubricated. Okay, so let's do just a quick review of chainsaw sharpening. The first step we did was to loosen the nuts and adjust the tension so that when we lift the chain, we can't quite lift the drive link out of the bar, but almost. So that's appropriately tensioned there. That keeps it from wiggling too much while you're sharpening, and also keeps it from coming off the bar when you get into, I would say top wood, like small diameter brush and junk like that that's kind of grabby. So then the next thing we talked about was the 25-degree angle this way while filing. It's very convenient when that little line is on the top of the tooth, because that you can line up your file with that. So we've got our 25-degree angle that way, and then from the other direction we wanted to run our file. Got our 25 degrees this way, and then in this orientation we want to be about 10 degrees tipped, like that. Come on, focus, there we go. And just like that. Okay? Do that from both sides. Any kind of crayon will do. You just need to mark the tooth. Oftentimes these days there is a gold colored link on some of the new Husqvarna chains. That's a nice feature, so you don't have to use the crayon, but any kind of crayon will do. Just pick one of your kids' crayons out of the box. And then raker filing. Got our handy dandy tool here. Sits on top of the teeth. One in the front and the one in the back, and we hold it down and run our file in the little belly there. And be conservative about that if you're new to chainsawing, because that makes the cutting quite a bit more aggressive, and you might not be ready for that. And then finally, don't forget to grease the tip. Well, that was a lengthy explanation of chainsaw filing, and I hope that you find it useful. I'm Reed. I make maple syrup and I cut wood. Enjoy.